photographs of guns and flame, scarlet skull and distant game, bayonet hand, jungle grin. Nightmares dreamed by bleeding men, lookouts tremble on the shore, but no man can find the war. Tape recorders echo scream, orders fly like bullets stream, drums and cannons laugh aloud.
National defense is grounded in fear. Public alarm over a perceived threat is always good for boosting military budgets and developing new and more powerful weapons. During the Cold War, this national security mania reached its apex when both the US and the Soviet Union amassed huge arsenals of nuclear weapons, capable of destroying Earth dozens of times over, in order to deter attacks on their shores. With the fall of the Soviet Empire, however, terrorism has become the face of fear in the 21st century, the shadowy threat that might just as easily come from stateless groups like Al-Qaeda as from rogue states like Iran or North Korea. Driven by fear, Americans have avidly backed the White House's international war on terror, yet they know next to nothing about who inside the Pentagon and government is waging this war and how it is being fought. Offutt Air Force Base outside of Omaha, Nebraska, has been the home of U.S. Strategic Command since the late 1940s. For over half a century, this remote base in America's heartland had one single mission: overseeing America's nuclear deterrent, its arsenal of air, land, and sea-based weapons of mass destruction. Strictly defensive, Strategic Command was the Pentagon's weapon of last resort, its doomsday machine that was to be used only after all other measures had failed, and the fate of the Earth was already sealed. The command and its ghastly mission became synonymous in the popular mind with the unthinkable, even serving as the inspiration for the 1960s cult film Dr. Strangelove, about a world-ending nuclear holocaust. The abrupt end of the Cold War in 1991, however, left Strategic Command a warrior without a foe, and its strategic value plummeted. A just-retired commander became a prominent nuclear disarmament advocate. And, in Washington, there was even talk about abolishing StratCom and its deadly mission altogether. Inside the Pentagon, you couldn't have found a command less equipped to offensively wage an international war on terror and scour the globe in search of a nebulous terrorist threat. The attacks of 9/11, however, were to perversely grant Strategic Command a new lease on life. From the moment George Bush was rushed to Offutt Air Force Base that day in September 2001, StratCom's role and mission began to morph. The command that, for more than half a century, it had been hoped would never need to be used, was now to be used for everything. Within months, this Cold War relic experienced what StratCom Commander Kevin Chilton described as not just a sea state change, but a tsunami of change in its purpose and power. To its historic charge of administering the nation's weapons of mass destruction, 7 new missions were added to its quiver: space dominance, prompt global strike, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, missile defense, information warfare, combating weapons of mass destruction, and cyber warfare. The days of StratCom being strictly a deterrent and defensive weapon of last resort to protect America's national security are long over. Today, the command and the thousands of nuclear weapons in its stockpile serves as the nerve center for offensively waging the White House's global fight against terrorism. As the new StratCom motto proudly asserts, U.S. Strategic Command is providing global security for America. With its new mission array, StratCom is now everywhere, doing everything. It's spying on us from space and snooping on our global communications through the National Security Agency. It's coordinating offensive computer warfare through its new Cyber Command. It's helping the CIA conduct secretive drone operations in Afghanistan and Yemen, including targeted assassinations of people whose names we don't even know. It's overseeing the deployment of the Pentagon's missile defense system worldwide and adapting it as an offensive anti-satellite weapon. With its international communications and intelligence capability, it's actively in the fight of every military ground operation, including covert actions like the killing of Osama bin Laden, and aiding the Northern Command's terror fight on the home front. It's combating the threat of weapons of mass destruction while simultaneously wielding the largest nuclear weapons arsenal in the world. It's literally charged with offensively responding to any perceived threat to U.S. security anywhere on the face of the earth within 1 hour. And yet, shunning the limelight as StratCom does, one would never guess the integral strategic and military role this super command performs at the core of the Department of Defense. Well before the 2000 election, Dick Cheney was urging presidential candidate George W. Bush to look at a retooled and enhanced strategic command as part of a muscular, unilateralist foreign policy promoted by the hawkish think tank Project for a New American Century. In his first months as commander-in-chief, Bush was already exhibiting this new swaggering mentality by unilaterally abrogating the anti-ballistic missile treaty with Russia and pledging full speed ahead on a missile defense system for Europe. But it was the attacks of 9/11 that provided the political pretext for the strategic centralization Cheney envisioned. Whether deliberate or coincidental, Bush's rushed visit to Offutt Air Force Base on September 11th was to serve as a portent of StratCom's coming transformation. Here we are today at the gates of Offutt Air Force Base outside Omaha, Nebraska. In August 2003, almost 2 years after the fall of the Twin Towers and 5 months after the invasion of Iraq, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld welcomed the Joint Chiefs and Regional Component Commanders to Omaha to talk about a new, improved strategic command with virtually everything under its umbrella. Rumsfeld already had eliminated the U.S. Space Command in October 2002, putting all its functions under Strategic Command. The nominal reason for the August 2003 meeting at Offutt was to discuss the new possibilities represented by Global Strike, a new offensive military doctrine emphasizing speed and surprise, paired with the development of a bevy of new state-of-the-art weapons, including an orbiting spaceplane, bunker buster mini-nukes, and conventionally armed intercontinental missiles. The end result of the gathering, though, was a universally recognized expansion of StratCom authority that gave the command exponentially more power than it ever wielded during the Cold War. The breadth of its mission array, technological capability, and the speed and agility with which it operates makes StratCom, without question, the greatest military command ever created. Space is the ultimate high ground. Whoever controls the heavens controls the earth below. Assigning the mission for space to StratCom in October 2002 sent a clear signal to the world community of America's intention to militarily dominate the heavens. This message was graphically driven home just 6 months later when the Omaha Command directed the shock and awe bombing campaign on Iraq with satellite-guided missiles and smart bombs in what Bush's Secretary of the Air Force publicly described as the first true space war. To date, the U.S. does not have any known weapons in orbital space, using this theater of war only for surveillance, targeting, and communications. But in June 2012, the Pentagon disclosed that it has been launching and remotely flying space planes, primarily the top-secret X-37B, with the capacity to dwell in orbit for more than a year. As these planes advance in capabilities, the likelihood of actual weapons being deployed in space will grow, not only to disable enemy satellites and spacecraft, but to attack targets on Earth from on high. To prevent a repetition of the attacks of 9/11, the Bush-Cheney White House vowed to take the war to the terrorists. In January 2003, StratCom was tasked with the newly created mission of Global Strike. Growing out of a secret Pentagon concept plan called Conplan 8022, Global Strike calls for offensively attacking any place on the face of the Earth within 1 hour on the mere perception of a threat to America's security, using either conventional or nuclear weapons. In short, it's a preemptive policy of shoot first and ask questions later that flouts international law while actively courting war. A raft of new state-of-the-art technologies have been put at StratCom's disposal to support this warfighting mission, including intercontinental ballistic missiles fitted with conventional warheads and orbiting space planes, as well as ready access to the U.S.'s network of international military bases. All 4 service branches of Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, and government entities from the CIA to NASA to the State Department. If it's a military action against a state or a non-state actor anywhere on the planet, be it tactical, strategic, instantaneous, delayed, nuclear, conventional, human, or robotic, StratCom is in the thick of it. The ABM Treaty of 1972 was supposed to prevent the development and deployment of anti-ballistic missile systems, but ever since Ronald Reagan gave his Star Wars speech in 1983, the Pentagon has wanted to use lasers, missiles, and kinetic weapons to knock out incoming nuclear warheads. It wasn't until the Bush-Cheney administration's abrogation of the ABM Treaty in 2001, however, that the lid on missile defense came completely off, and StratCom was ultimately tasked with this mission as well. The command's use of its missile defense system to shoot down a disabled satellite in 2008 graphically demonstrated 2 things to the watching world community. America's land and sea-based missile defense system can be employed as a space weapon, and this so-called missile defense isn't just defensive, but is an offensive tool of war. Despite the change of administrations in the White House, the enthusiasm for missile defense has continued unabated, with new bases planned in Eastern Europe and new ships deployed off the coasts of China and Korea. These moves, however, are destabilizing geopolitical relations. In May 2012, Russia suggested that it would consider adopting a first strike policy, perhaps involving nuclear weapons, to prevent the stationing of missile defense installations in Europe. Every phone call you make, every email you send, every action you take in public is collected by secret, multi-billion-dollar agencies with names like National Security Agency and National Reconnaissance Office. And under its mission for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, StratCom oversees all 16 of the nation's intelligence organizations, from the CIA to the FBI. This integrated intelligence network is critical to StratCom's ability to wage its round-the-clock war on terror. Here's an example. Let's say a flight officer is piloting an armed drone from a ground station in Nevada. That flight officer might bring up a real-time picture of a truck driving in the Yemen desert, a picture provided courtesy of a spy satellite or a surveillance drone. One mouse click on that picture will bring up information on screen of who owns the truck, who the truck owner's best friends are, who the owner has visited lately, and what the truck is likely carrying. One more click can send a Hellfire missile shooting out of the sky, destroying the truck before the occupants ever knew what hit them. That integration of intelligence is managed by StratCom. And even though we spend billions on 24-hour, 7-day real-time intelligence, mistakes can be made and innocent people killed. StratCom's mission for cyber warfare has been swathed in secrecy to keep the world from knowing what it was up to. When word of the Stuxnet computer virus first surfaced in 2011, the early evidence pointed to Israel's Unit 8200 as responsible for creating the worm to disrupt Iran's nuclear program. But on June 1st, 2012, the New York Times leaked the story that, in fact, Cyber Command and StratCom's Component Command, the National Security Agency, had jointly developed and unleashed both the Stuxnet and Flame computer viruses on the Iranian nation. In defending this preemptive action, some have argued that such a cyber attack is preferable to full-scale war or bombing. But to the targets of such offensive cyber warfare, an assault is an assault that can produce collateral damage of real death and destruction while potentially sparking actual physical conflict. And count on it, there will be consequences for the U.S.'s actions. The Stuxnet and Flame cyber attacks constitute the first known state-sponsored offensive cyber assaults by one nation against another. In the eyes of the international community, the United States has voluntarily opened up a whole new theater of warfare and is now itself fair game. And with the U.S. government, American industry, and even the Pentagon totally dependent on cyber technology, Americans are more vulnerable than anyone to computer attack by foreign hackers. It is worth taking a look at one element of Cyber Command that once constituted its own component command within StratCom, information warfare, now a part of Cyber Command. The public part of information warfare is also known as Global Network Operations and refers to the global communications network running from land, sea, and space to provide U.S. forces information superiority in battle. But there is a little-known and more cryptic public relations component to information warfare that is designed to complement physical force operations. Like some modern-day Ministry of Propaganda, the command, according to StratCom itself, manages a range of operations such as deception and psychological, electronic, and cyber warfare to influence the tide of war. What that all entails, StratCom isn't saying, but it's doubtful that even Congress knows. StratCom often cites its combating weapons of mass destruction mission to show that its activities can be defensive in nature. And undoubtedly, the study of WMDs possessed by U.S. adversaries might indeed help us to avoid future conflicts escalating into nuclear or chemical exchanges. But as the previous discussion of cyber war emphasizes, it's hard to distinguish defensive from offensive actions any longer. StratCom's Center for Combating Weapons of Mass Destruction may be helping the U.S. maintain an unbeatable nuclear edge, as much as it is protecting us from rogue state nukes. In the media today, we are constantly reminded of the threat posed by nuclear have-not nations, such as Iran and North Korea, who want the bomb. Many like to forget, however, that the nuclear halves of the U.S. and Russia are still in possession of thousands of weapons from the stockpiles they developed during the Cold War. StratCom itself still manages 5,000 strategic weapons on bombers, ICBMs, and sea-launched missiles, many of which are ready to be launched from the prairies of Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, and other states. But this is not simply the Dr. Strangelove world of days gone by. It's even scarier. Unlike during the Cold War, there is no longer a dedicated nuclear weapons command charged with administering America's nuclear deterrent. Today, StratCom's nuclear force is overseen by Global Strike Command and is an integral part of the Pentagon's offensive military strategy. When the commander of Global Strike came to Vandenberg Air Force Base in the summer of 2010 to witness the test of a Minuteman II missile, some observers were surprised to hear him say nothing about deterrence, talking instead about waging war. But that's the dark underside of StratCom's transformation into a warfighting command. The firewall between the use of conventional and nuclear weapons in conflict has crumbled. War is now war by any means possible. The gloves are off. And all weapons, nuclear as well as conventional, are on the table in the fight against America's adversaries. If a unified nuclear and conventional warfighting unit isn't enough to scare you, what if that mission is put into the hands of robots? Ultimately, the most frightening aspect of the new StratCom may not be its breadth and reach, but its reliance on highly automated, instant response control loops between what Air Force Space Command terms the sensor and the shooter. Republicans and Democrats alike see high-tech warfare as a way of moving to antiseptic standoff war at a distance, where the results of your attacks are rarely seen. But this focus on automation and efficiency in order to reduce response time to a perceived threat comes at a cost: human intervention. StratCom Commander James Cartwright warned in 2007 only has about 100 seconds to identify an object launched off the face of the earth. To type it, figure out what it is, and act, Cartwright said. I can't even get a phone call through that fast. But the national system is set up to have a phone conference about that. It's not possible. And the time frame for dealing with a cyber attack is even less. A virus launched out of Baghdad toward the U.S., he stated, can go 23,000 miles out to geosynchronous orbit and back down to Seattle for the attack in 300 milliseconds. StratCom, General Cartwright explained, has to build the organizational construct to work in these timelines. We have to change the cultural approach to doing business, from having people get involved and discuss and review and then decide and then execute, to intervention by exception, machine to machine. The compressed time frame of necessity, StratCom's leadership argues, limits democratic input. Decisions have to be made, machine to machine. But what happens to all the people who think they have a vote? General Cartwright asked his listeners. He answered his own question. They're disenfranchised. In late May 2012, the New York Times revealed that President Obama personally signs off on every armed drone assault that has targeted a specific individual. Defenders of the president can say that Obama has made the responsibility for assault very clear and is avoiding any buck passing in its office. Critics can say with equal justification that the public never had any input in the decision to override the 1976 U.S. pledge to never target individuals for assassination. Beginning with George Bush and his CIA death squads, and evolving through Obama and his drones, the White House has slowly assumed the authority for targeted assassinations, for killing without warning. Look at the congressional response after the report on the targeted drone assassinations and the subsequent article on Cyber Command's complicity in the Stuxnet and Flame viruses broke in the New York Times. Did either political party complain the drone war and cyber war are being carried out by the White House in defiance of the provisions of the War Powers Act? Not at all. Democrats and Republicans alike only demanded to know who was leaking the secrets and what was to be done with them. No one asked about the constitutional checks and balances involved in waging automated war. Of StratCom say that overuse of drones for legalized murder may be only the first step in an ominous trend. Today, the president claims authority for enabling death by robot. Soon, the management of multiple automated programs by StratCom will allow war to be waged by missile, by drone, by computer, by satellite, without the benefit of a human in the loop, making the kind of direct decision President Obama seems proud to own. Global strikes soon will mean a war waged by StratCom, heavily reliant on robot forces, robot intelligence, and automated escalation from conventional to nuclear weapons. Stanley Kubrick created the dark comedy Dr. Strangelove at a time when Strategic Command was in charge of a nuclear arsenal that could lead to global devastation of unprecedented proportions. Today, StratCom still oversees a nuclear force that could kill all humans multiple times over. But layered on top of this old-fashioned doomsday machine is a new StratCom armada of space planes, robot drones, Star Wars missile defense, intelligence platforms, and cyber war tools, many whose weapons have been designed to be used in fully automated fashion. A Dr. Strangelove on steroids. Today, we are shocked to learn that a president chooses victims for robot assassination. Tomorrow, we may face a robot and cyber force in which decisions of military escalation are made automatically with no human intervention. This is the threat that the modern StratCom, with its ceaseless technological quest for agility and speed, now poses to the world. This is the menace that our unchecked fears over national security have unleashed upon us. This is the command that must now be reined back in by constitutional attorneys, civil libertarians, and peace activists before it careens permanently out of control. More than half a century ago, with the atomic bombings of Japan and the dawn of the nuclear age, the world had to contend with the bomb. Today, if we are to endure, we must contend with StratCom.
Disarm you with a smile, leave me like they left me, to wither in denial. The bitterness of one who's left alone. The years killer in me's the killer in you. Send this smile over to you.
Thanks, guys.